The galaxy was in chaos. Once, it had been a place of peace and order, where powerful species ruled with the strength of their fleets and the might of their armies. But now, everything was unraveling. Alien empires that had once stood tall were crumbling. Massive warships that had once been the pride of their species were now little more than drifting husks, abandoned and broken. The stars that had been home to entire civilizations now burned with the fires of war, each explosion echoing across the heavens like a dying star. It was as if the universe itself was shaking with fear. The aliens had no one left to turn to. Their most powerful fleets had fallen. Their most skilled warriors were either dead or in hiding, and their leaders, once full of pride, were begging for mercy. No one had seen this coming. The ancient treaties, the alliances that had kept peace for centuries, had fallen apart. And now, the galaxy was on the brink of total collapse. Then, a message came. It was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, a desperate plea for help. The galaxy's greatest empires, now shattered, were calling for assistance. The message echoed across the stars, a cry for help that would soon become the galaxy's last hope. Please, the message began, we have no more power, no more strength. The enemies that threaten us are too strong, and we are too weak. The galaxy is falling apart. We beg you, help us. There is no one else. Only you can save us now. But the help they sought did not come from their allies. It did not come from the other powerful species they had known. It came from a place that no one expected, Earth. The humans had been quiet for so long, living on the fringes of the galaxy, barely noticed by the more powerful species. They were a young race, with no massive fleets, no advanced technology that could rival the great empires of the stars. In fact, humanity was often dismissed as nothing more than a primitive species, unworthy of attention. Their technology was crude, their armies small, and their reputation was non-existent. Yet, when the cry for help reached the ears of the humans, they responded, but not in the way the galaxy might have hoped. The humans did not come to help quietly. They did not come with humility, with the promise of offering their lives to save those of the galaxy. No, the humans came with something much more dangerous: confidence. They arrived with strength in their hearts and fire in their souls. And they weren't just coming to save anyone. They were coming to show the galaxy that humanity was no longer a weak, insignificant species. They were coming to prove that, when the time came, humans could do what no other race could. They could fight, and they would not fight quietly. At first, the aliens thought it was a mistake. A fleet of humans, no bigger than a handful of ships, appeared in the galaxy's vastness. The alien leaders laughed, dismissing them as nothing more than a nuisance. What can a handful of humans do against the enemies who have brought us to the edge of extinction? They scoffed. But in a matter of hours, the human fleet had wiped out the alien force. What was left of the enemy ships drifted in space, powerless and broken. The humans, who had once been dismissed as weak and insignificant, had just won their first battle. But this victory was not just a tactical win. It was a declaration. The human fleet was small, but they made up for it with their sheer unpredictability. Where the alien fleets would form defensive walls and take calculated strikes, the humans attacked with everything they had. They didn't care about tradition or the rules of war. They fought to win, and that was enough to throw their enemies into disarray. And it wasn't just the humans' military tactics that shocked the galaxy. It was their resilience. Human soldiers fought with a kind of wild determination that the galaxy's finest had never seen before. When the enemy thought they had the upper hand, humans turned the tide with sheer force of will. They didn't fight like well-trained soldiers. They fought like a species that had been backed into a corner and had nothing left to lose. They fought like they had everything to prove. Word of the human success spread quickly. The galaxy, once confident in its superiority, now faced a dilemma. The old ways of warfare, the old strategies, no longer seemed to work against this new force. The powerful alien species that had once dominated the galaxy now found themselves facing an enemy that refused to be intimidated, an enemy that was determined to take what it wanted, no matter the cost. But the humans didn't stop there. They didn't just win battles, they turned the tide of the war. The alien forces, once so sure of their victory, now found themselves retreating, scrambling to regroup and reorganize their defenses. The once proud empires that had ruled the galaxy for millennia began to crack. Their armies, once so invincible, now struggled to keep up with humanity's relentless onslaught. At the same time, humanity's influence began to spread. They weren't just fighting battles, they were forging alliances. Where the galaxy's most powerful species had failed to unite, the humans were succeeding. Other species, seeing the strength of humanity, began to ally with them. There were whispers in the stars, rumors of new alliances forming between humans and species that had once seen them as nothing more than a curiosity. Humanity was changing the galaxy in ways that no one had predicted. The message from Earth, once just a bold statement of intent, had now become a rallying cry. "We are here," the humans had said, "and we will not go quietly." And they weren't. Everywhere the humans went, they left a trail of victory, not just in battle, but in shaping the future. The once unified powers of the galaxy were now splintering, and humanity was at the center of it all. The galaxy's greatest empires, who had laughed at humanity's entry into the galactic stage, now found themselves facing that terrifying reality. Humanity was no longer a species to be ignored. They were a force to be reckoned with. And as the battles continued, the truth began to sink in. The galaxy had called for help, and humanity had answered, but not in the way anyone expected. No longer were the humans seen as weak or insignificant. They were feared, they were respected, and they were ready to take their place among the stars. The rest of the galaxy could only watch as humanity redefined the balance of power in ways no one had imagined possible. The galaxy had pleaded for mercy, but what it had received instead was a force of nature, a new power that refused to be bent or broken. And it was just getting started. The shockwaves of humanity's unexpected victory spread across the galaxy like a wildfire. The once mighty empires, whose foundations had been built on centuries of dominance and unquestioned superiority, were now in full retreat. The realization was dawning on them. The humans, the species they had long dismissed as nothing more than an insignificant outlier on the galactic stage, had become the galaxy's most dangerous new player. And they weren't content to sit quietly in the shadows. Humanity's fight wasn't just about military conquest. It was a fight to assert their right to exist in a universe that had long ignored them. The galaxy had underestimated humans, believing their chaos and unpredictability would be their downfall. But now it was clear, those very qualities had become their greatest strengths. The aliens who had mocked humanity's entry into the galactic fold were now terrified of the passion and grit that came with every human they encountered. Every battle fought by the humans carried an intensity no one had expected. The alien species had trained for war for centuries, their forces prepared for every conceivable tactic. But the humans didn't fight the way anyone expected them to. They were untamed, wild. Their soldiers didn't fight with precision or formality. They fought with a raw energy, an unyielding drive to win at all costs. Their tactics were unpredictable, often unorganized, but always effective. And when the battle was done, they left behind a trail of destruction that forced the galaxy to realize the truth. Humanity was not like any other species they had faced. Where the alien forces fought with years of experience and advanced weaponry, humanity fought with a fierce determination that seemed to come from the very core of their being. The aliens had always relied on technology, on their superior ships, on their vast armies. But the humans? They had learned to make do with whatever they could get their hands on. And they used those tools, be they old or new, with ruthless efficiency. They turned the tide of battle with nothing more than sheer willpower, unafraid to adapt, to improvise, to push their resources to the limit. One particular battle stood out, a turning point that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The humans had infiltrated a heavily fortified alien stronghold on a distant world, one that had been considered virtually impenetrable by all who had tried to breach it. The alien forces, convinced that no one could breach their defenses, were completely unprepared for what was coming. The human forces, although smaller in number, had learned from every fight. They didn't follow the old rules of warfare. Instead of attacking the stronghold head-on, they used the terrain to their advantage, luring the enemy into traps. They used guerrilla tactics, striking quickly and then vanishing before the enemy could retaliate. It was the kind of warfare the galaxy's older civilizations couldn't understand. A chaotic, relentless storm of attacks that left the enemy in a constant state of confusion. The humans didn't give their enemies time to regroup or rethink their strategy. When one tactic failed, they immediately tried another, each time learning from their mistakes. And the galaxy's greatest minds, trained in the art of war, could do nothing but watch in horror as their once impenetrable fortresses fell to humanity's unpredictability. The stronghold's defenses were breached not by advanced weaponry or overwhelming force, but by sheer human creativity. The enemy, whose armies had been built on centuries of tradition, were no match for the relentless human drive. But it wasn't just the battles that left the galaxy stunned. It was what came after. The humans didn't stop with military victories. They understood that power didn't just lie in taking worlds. It lay in uniting them. The humans had a unique way of drawing people to their cause. As word of their victories spread, other species, some of whom had once seen humans as nothing more than a curiosity, began to reconsider their stance. They saw what humanity was capable of, not just in war, but in diplomacy, in leadership. The human soldiers, who fought fiercely, also had a remarkable ability to inspire others, to make allies out of enemies. The first to ally with humans were the Ilrics, a species known for their advanced technology and mastery of energy manipulation. For years, the Ilrics had watched from the sidelines, unsure whether humanity could really live up to their bold promises. But after witnessing the human success in battle and their ability to unite disparate forces, they finally decided to offer their support. The Ilrics supply humanity with new technologies and enhanced weaponry, further strengthening the human forces. Other species, too, began to seek alliances with the humans. The Ziraxi, a fierce warrior race, were among the first to offer their warriors in exchange for human leadership in key sectors of the galaxy. These alliances were unconventional, built on mutual respect, forged through battle, not diplomacy. Humanity's willingness to take risks, to fight when all others hesitated, had earned them the respect of species that had once looked down on them. Meanwhile, the galaxy's elite, those who had once ruled with an iron fist, found themselves more and more isolated. The once great empires that had thought themselves invincible now faced a new kind of challenge. The humans didn't want to simply take control. They wanted to reshape the galaxy, to ensure that no one species could dominate all others. They preached unity, diversity, and the idea that the galaxy's future lay in working together, not in power struggles. The human influence spread like a wave. The galaxy, once fractured by old grudges and divisions, slowly began to change. Humans didn't come quietly into the galaxy. They came with a roar, a force that could not be ignored. They didn't just win battles. They won hearts and minds. They didn't just take power. They shared it, allowing other species to have a voice in shaping the future. And so, the galaxy that had once seen humans as nothing more than a curiosity now found itself united under a new banner: humanity's. The old powers, those that had laughed at the humans, now looked upon them with a mixture of fear and awe. The humans had proven themselves, and the galaxy had no choice but to accept it. But the humans weren't content with merely being the galaxy's newest power. They wanted to ensure that their influence would last. The old ways of doing things, the old divisions, the old power struggles were no longer acceptable. Humanity had a new vision for the future, and they were determined to make it a reality. As the final battles raged and the galaxy began to rebuild, one thing was clear. Humanity had not just come to save the galaxy. They had come to change it, and no one would stand in their way. The galaxy had pleaded for mercy, and now it was time to face the consequences of that plea. As the galaxy adapted to humanity's rise, tensions grew even higher. The leaders of the once mighty empires, who had initially scoffed at the humans' raw, chaotic methods of warfare, now found themselves trapped between fear and reluctant respect. They had never imagined that the galaxy's future could lie in the hands of such a small, unpredictable species. Humanity's sudden dominance was shaking the very foundations of everything they had built. They had underestimated the power of resolve, of sheer will, and now they were paying the price. The newly formed human alliances were solidifying, and the once fractured galaxy was starting to take on a new shape. No longer were the great galactic empires the sole powers in the universe. Humanity was at the center, driving the change with each victory and each newfound ally. Yet, the transition wasn't smooth. Every empire and species that had once ruled with absolute authority was now faced with the question: how much power would they be willing to cede to the humans? Would they accept the new order, or would they rebel against it? The situation grew even more complicated when the Vorthian Dominion, one of the oldest and most technologically advanced empires in the galaxy, openly declared their opposition to humanity's rise. The Vorthians had been among the first to dismiss the humans as irrelevant, and they had watched as the humans' influence spread like wildfire. Now, the Vorthian Empire saw itself at risk of losing everything they had built: their power, their legacy, their place in the galaxy's history. They had to stop humanity, or face extinction as a great power. The Vorthians weren't the only ones who felt threatened. A coalition of other species, many of them warriors who had spent centuries perfecting their craft, secretly met to form an alliance. They feared humanity's growing influence, and they knew that in order to maintain their place in the galaxy, they had to act fast. Together, they would challenge humanity's power, bring them to their knees, and remind them of their place in the universe. The first strike came unexpectedly. A large fleet of Vorthian warships appeared in the human-controlled sector, launching a surprise assault on the human forces. The galaxy watched as the two sides collided in a fierce battle that would go down in history as one of the most brutal conflicts the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Vorthians believed that they could overwhelm the humans with their superior firepower and technology. But once again, they had underestimated humanity. The humans fought back with everything they had. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy who had far more advanced weaponry. But humanity had something that their enemies didn't: an unyielding spirit. The human fleet used every advantage they could find. They adapted to the Vorthian strategies, turning their own weapons against them. The humans didn't just fight. They used every ounce of their ingenuity to survive, to find weaknesses, and to strike when their enemies least expected it. In the midst of the battle, the humans proved just how far they had come. They had grown from a small, isolated species into a military powerhouse that could face down the greatest threats the galaxy had to offer. The fight wasn't just about military might anymore. It was about humanity's ability to endure, to evolve, and to adapt to any situation. And it was a message to the galaxy: no matter how strong the opposition, humanity would never back down. As the battle raged on, the Vorthian fleet began to falter. Their ships were faster, more technologically advanced, but the humans were relentless. Their tactics, born of necessity and desperation, were proving more effective than anyone had imagined. The battle stretched on for hours, then days, until the Vorthians, with all their superior technology, were forced to retreat. The victory was a turning point for humanity. It wasn't just a military success. It was a statement to the galaxy. Humanity was not just a fleeting power. They were a force to be reckoned with. And now, they had sent a clear message to the galaxy's old powers. No longer would they stand idly by. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future where they, and every other species willing to embrace change, would have a place. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy began to realize that the humans weren't just another species looking for a piece of the pie. They were something entirely different. They didn't just want to coexist. They wanted to reshape the galaxy's future. They wanted to create a new order, one built on cooperation, not domination. And so, as the dust settled from the Vorthian defeat, humanity's influence continued to spread. The human-led alliance grew stronger. The once feared empires began to come to terms with their new reality. They could fight humanity, or they could join them. But no one could deny the truth anymore. The galaxy was no longer ruled by the old powers. The humans had arrived, and they weren't going anywhere. As the human fleet continued its campaigns across the stars, the message remained the same. We are here to stay. We will not back down. We will not go quietly into the dark. The galaxy had pleaded for mercy, and humanity had answered, not with silence, but with a roar that would echo across the stars for centuries to come. The galaxy had been forever altered. The old powers, once thought invincible, were now in disarray. The mighty Vorthian Dominion, the very empire that had launched the first strike against humanity, was on the verge of collapse. The message had been sent loud and clear. Humanity was no longer a species to be ignored. They had fought their way through every challenge, every battle, and had emerged stronger with each victory. No longer were they a curiosity or a minor player on the galactic stage. They were a dominant force, one that could not be stopped. The galaxy's greatest leaders, once full of arrogance and disdain for the upstart humans, now found themselves in a difficult position. The Vorthians, who had once ruled the stars with an iron fist, were no longer a threat. Humanity had decimated their fleet and shattered their empire. But the fall of the Vorthian Dominion wasn't the only shift in the galaxy. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Humanity's growing influence was now being felt in every corner of the galaxy. The alliance they had forged was beginning to take shape into something far more powerful than anyone had anticipated. The species that had once been enemies of humanity now found themselves under its protection. The alliances that had formed in the wake of the Vorthian defeat were becoming stronger, more unified, and humanity, ever relentless, was at the center of it all. The galaxy's old empires, now fractured and disorganized, could no longer stand against this tide of change. They had once believed themselves to be the only true powers in the universe, but now they had to share the stars with a species they had long underestimated. Humanity wasn't content with merely surviving. They had set their sights on something far greater. They wanted to shape the galaxy's future, to ensure that every species, no matter how small or insignificant they seemed, had a voice. They wanted to create a new order, one that would eliminate the corruption and division that had long defined the galaxy. And the galaxy, whether they liked it or not, had no choice but to listen. The humans were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future in which every species could stand side by side as equals. The galaxy's leaders could either join this new order or find themselves buried beneath the weight of change. Humanity had proven that it would not be silenced, that it would not be cowed by the old powers. And as their influence spread, the galaxy could no longer deny the truth. There were still those who resisted, who clung to the old ways, but they were growing fewer and farther between. The once unified Galactic Council, which had been the ruling body of the galaxy for millennia, now found itself divided. The humans had pushed too far, too fast, and the old council members could not keep up. They had failed to adapt, while humanity had already moved ahead. The once proud council, which had believed it could control the galaxy through diplomacy and force, was now struggling to hold on to its relevance in the face of humanity's rapid expansion. But as humanity's influence grew, so did their enemies. The remnants of the Vorthian Dominion, though defeated, still had loyal followers. These remnants, backed by a few disaffected species, began to form a new resistance movement. They believed that the galaxy could not be ruled by a species that had arrived only a few centuries ago. Humanity, in their eyes, was too young, too chaotic, too unpredictable to lead the galaxy. They couldn't accept that a species of such humble origins could now control so much power. And so, the stage was set for the final struggle, a battle not just for control of the galaxy, but for the future itself. Humanity had risen from nothing, from a planet no one had ever considered significant, to become the dominant force in the galaxy. The galaxy had pleaded for mercy, and humanity had answered. But now the question was whether humanity could maintain their newfound power, or if those who resisted would rise up once again. The final confrontation was coming. The remnants of the old powers, united under the banner of resistance, were preparing for one last, desperate push. But humanity was ready. They had fought for everything they had, each world, each alliance, each victory, and they were prepared to fight again. This time, however, it wasn't just about military might. Humanity had built something stronger than just weapons. They had built a future, a vision of unity, and a belief that no force in the galaxy could stop them. The battle lines were drawn, and the fate of the galaxy rested in the balance. The old powers would fight to hold onto the past, while humanity would fight to create a new future. The galaxy had pleaded for mercy, but humanity's answer had been clear. They would not go quietly. They would fight until every last star was theirs, until every last voice was heard, and until the galaxy was forever reshaped in their image. The stage was set, and the final battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. No one could predict who would emerge victorious. But one thing was certain: humanity would not be easily defeated. The galaxy had pleaded for mercy, and now it was humanity's turn to decide the fate of the stars.